Pregnant wife discovers millionaire husband's affair during dinner, causing a public scene. A hush fell over the opulent ballroom as billionaire Jonathan Saxon stood at the center of a grand birthday celebration held in his honor. Glittering chandeliers reflected off marble floors, and rows of dignitaries, family, and close friends raised their crystal glasses in tribute. Beside him, his pregnant wife, Celia, wore a smile that never reached her eyes. She gently rested her hand on her growing belly, feeling a sense of foreboding she couldn't quite explain. Everywhere she turned, guests whispered about the perfect couple, or so they believed. Unbeknownst to them, the seeds of betrayal had already been planted, ready to erupt in public view. Celia Saxon had fallen in love with Jonathan the moment she first saw him 8 years ago at a small fundraising event for a children's hospital. Back then, he was merely a rising star in his family's powerful real estate empire, Saxon Holdings. She had been a volunteer who believed in using her marketing background to further charitable causes. Their meeting had been unplanned. Celia approached Jonathan to discuss a sponsorship deal. There was an electric charge between them from the start. He was kind, charming, and astonishingly charismatic. He spoke passionately about wanting to expand healthcare initiatives for underprivileged communities. Celia felt seen, truly seen, as if no one else in the crowded banquet hall existed but the two of them. Though Jonathan came from unimaginable wealth, he had a genuine quality that set him apart from other billionaires' heirs. For their first date, he invited her to a small jazz club in a quieter part of the city, wanting to show her that his interests went well beyond boardrooms and luxury penthouses. That night, over the velvety croon of a saxophone, their hands found each other's, and Celia started to believe in a future where money wasn't everything, and love could bloom in the unlikeliest corners. In the years that followed, they built a life that appeared to sparkle from the outside. The media, of course, had a field day with their romance once it became public. It wasn't every day that a scion of the Saxon dynasty dated a woman who wasn't already deeply entrenched in high society. Rumors swirled that his family disapproved of her, that Celia was a gold digger, or that their relationship was a fleeting fancy. But as time passed, those rumors dissipated in the face of their consistent show of devotion. Jonathan stood up to his parents, George and Marcia Saxon, refusing to end the relationship. Celia, too, proved her loyalty to him and to the family's philanthropic interests, pouring her heart into charitable ventures that complemented Saxon Holdings' expansions. They married in a lavish ceremony in Monte Carlo, attended by hundreds of VIPs, from senators to Hollywood stars, from CEOs like Bernard Arnault to tech visionaries like Elon Musk. Yet for all the attention, Celia kept her feet planted firmly on the ground. She never let the glamour overshadow the simpler joys that first brought them together. Over the last 7 years of marriage, they had grown a union that inspired millions, or so it seemed on the outside. Beneath the perfect images splashed across tabloids and social media, small fissures had begun to form. Jonathan's rise within Saxon Holdings had been meteoric. He became CEO at the young age of 32 after securing landmark deals in Europe and Asia. Such a rapid ascension demanded most of his time. The more he climbed, the more the demands of business overshadowed his personal life. Celia felt their conversations grow shorter, their date nights become rarer, and the messages on her phone from him seemed increasingly businesslike, filled with talk of expansions, board meetings, and stock valuations. When Celia became pregnant, there had been a brief interlude of hope. Jonathan was overjoyed. He carried her ultrasound pictures everywhere. For a moment, Celia felt that radiant warmth of their early days return. He cancelled 2 corporate trips to be with her during the first ultrasounds. She thought finally They were refocusing on what truly mattered: family. But soon, the corporate world came calling again. Mergers and acquisitions overshadowed prenatal appointments, and Jonathan vanished for weeks at a time to pursue new deals and investors. Celia tried to be understanding. She recognized the burdens on Jonathan's shoulders. Saxon Holdings was no small operation. The family business had soared to new heights under his leadership, and everyone looked to him for direction. But how many times could she dine alone in their palatial penthouse? How many charity events could she attend without him by her side? How many nights would she wait up, rubbing her pregnant belly as his name glowed on the screen from some far-flung time zone? As the months ticked by, Celia found herself reading up on postpartum depression and the unique challenges of being pregnant amid stressful situations. It wasn't typical reading material for a billionaire's wife. Most of her peers, it seemed, simply accepted their husbands' commitments. But Celia had never been the type to just stand by, ignoring the warning signs. She wanted her marriage to be more than a photogenic arrangement. One afternoon, while Celia was sipping tea at the exclusive Gardenia Lounge in Manhattan, an acquaintance, Alyssa Carter, an old friend from a philanthropic board, leaned in close and whispered a remark that froze Celia mid-sip. "I heard Jonathan's been spotted having dinner alone with his new communications assistant," Alyssa murmured. The tone suggested more than business. Celia forced herself to breathe and keep her expression neutral. She had never heard of Jonathan hiring a new communications assistant, especially one who accompanied him to private dinners. Alyssa quickly apologized for the intrusion and said it was probably nothing. But Celia felt the small seed of unease bury itself deeper in her heart. That same evening, when Jonathan returned from work, she asked him casually about the new hire. His response was abrupt and a little too practiced. "Oh, I hired someone to help with some European PR strategies, just for a short-term contract," he said, avoiding her eyes. Celia wanted to believe him, but the dryness in his tone made her uneasy. She was no stranger to the corporate world. She knew how quickly rumor mills churned out exaggerations. Still, the coincidences, his extended business trips, the hollow texts, the late nights were piling up. Rather than confront him directly, she decided to quietly investigate whether these rumors held any merit. Soon after, Celia noticed Jonathan's phone buzzing at odd hours: 2 a.m., 3 a.m. She couldn't ignore the pattern. On multiple occasions, the name Madeleine F. flashed across the screen. Celia remembered that the alleged new assistant was called Madeleine Fox, or so Alyssa had hinted. Once or twice would have been suspicious enough, but the repeated late-night calls ratcheted her anxiety into full-blown fear. When Celia mustered the courage to ask him about it, Jonathan's explanation was quick. "Time zones," he said gruffly. "She's in Europe. Sometimes we need to finalize details about an investor meeting." That was plausible enough. Saxon Holdings had offices in London and Paris. Yet Celia couldn't reconcile the way he used to share every detail of his day with her, how he used to tell her stories of his negotiations as they cooked dinner together. Now it felt as though she was a second priority, forced to wait for scraps of his attention. In the swirl of heartbreak and uncertainty, Celia tried to push her suspicions aside, focusing instead on her pregnancy. She volunteered at a local women's shelter, wanting to stay active and grounded. At night, she would gently press her palm against her belly and sing lullabies, hopeful that Jonathan would walk in at any moment and join her in this small act of love. But that seldom happened. Jonathan, for his part, appeared more stressed than ever. Board meetings ran late, and sometimes he wouldn't come home at all, claiming he'd stayed at the Saxon Towers executive suite to work through the night. Celia could do nothing but watch her once devoted husband slip away, uncertain if it was purely the weight of business or something more nefarious. Their wedding anniversary was on the horizon, yet Jonathan made no mention of celebrating. Instead, He surprised Celia with an invitation to a high-profile gala dinner at the iconic Waldorf Regency Hotel. The event was to honor philanthropic contributions made by Saxon Holdings to multiple hospitals across New York City. It was a black tie event featuring several prominent figures, including old friends like Dr. Naomi Wu from the Cornell Medical Center, a longtime beneficiary of Saxon philanthropy. On the surface, it seemed like a warm reminder of the cause that first brought them together. Celia latched onto the invitation as a sign that her husband still wanted to keep up appearances, if not salvage their relationship. In the days leading up to the dinner, Celia told herself that everything would be fine. She would choose an elegant gown, stand by her husband's side, and find a moment to speak with him about their future. She spent hours practicing calm, reassuring phrases in front of the mirror. After all, approaching him in an accusatory manner might only drive them further apart. She wanted answers, but she also wanted to salvage their bond, not tear it to shreds. The night of the gala arrived. Celia, 5 months pregnant, wore a flowing, midnight blue gown that accentuated her gently rounded belly. Diamond earrings gleamed against her dark hair, a wedding gift from Jonathan years prior. Stepping out of the limousine, she felt the pop of camera flashes immediately. Reporters and paparazzi lined the entrance, calling out for quotes and photos of the glamorous couple. Jonathan, dressed in a tailored charcoal tuxedo, held her hand as they walked past the cameras. In that brief moment, Celia allowed herself to believe that they were still the golden couple everyone claimed they were. Inside the grand ballroom, a string quartet performed classical pieces under vaulted ceilings. Towering arrangements of lilies and orchids lent a fresh fragrance to the otherwise heavily perfumed air. Waiters clad in sharp black suits circulated with trays of champagne flutes and sparkling water. Celia chose water. She had to be cautious. Jonathan greeted fellow magnates, doctors, and influential philanthropists with polished charm. He introduced Celia to some of them, his voice smooth and practiced. Yet behind that veneer, Celia sensed a tension in his posture, a certain forced enthusiasm in his laugh. Celia tried to slip in small inquiries about how he had been coping with the work stress. Jonathan dodged them politely, offering only surface-level reassurances. "All good, Celia. Let's not worry tonight. We're here for a good cause," he'd say. She nodded, feeling an invisible wall between them that she couldn't name. In the corner of her vision, she kept noticing a tall, willowy woman with sleek blonde hair, dressed in a crimson gown, glancing repeatedly in their direction. Celia recognized her face vaguely from social media photos that circled the business world. She was indeed Madeline Fox, the new communications assistant rumored to be working closely with Jonathan. Madeline flitted from group to group with an air of confidence that belied her official job title. She laughed openly, sipped champagne, and at times cast knowing smiles at Jonathan across the room. The few times Jonathan spotted her, a flicker of discomfort crossed his features. He tried to hide it behind a cordial nod. Celia's heart pounded every time she caught them exchanging glances. Something about their locked eye contact unsettled her more than any rumor or phone call. It wasn't the mere presence of a colleague. It was loaded, charged with an intensity that had no place in a purely professional relationship. The deeper Celia stared into their dynamic, the more certain she became the rumors were real. Her husband was involved in an affair with Madeline Fox. Dinner was a sumptuous affair. Each table was draped in white linens embroidered with gold thread, while centerpieces of fresh roses added a romantic touch. Jonathan and Celia were seated at the VIP table along with other philanthropic heavyweights, including Dr. Naomi Wu, real estate mogul Richard Calder, and actress Eva Mendes, who served as an ambassador for one of the charities. Conversation flowed from medical breakthroughs to global philanthropic efforts. Yet Celia could barely taste her meal, her mind swirling with the knowledge that all was not what it seemed. At the height of dinner, the master of ceremonies signaled for attention. It was time to honor Saxon Holdings for their enormous contributions to medical research. Jonathan rose to speak, offering heartfelt gratitude to the hospital boards, to the Saxon family's philanthropic committee, and to Celia, whom he credited as a major inspiration. The audience applauded thunderously as Celia forced a gracious smile, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. Jonathan's final remarks were about the importance of family and community in shaping the future. If only they knew. After the applause died down, everyone lifted their glasses in a celebratory toast. Cameras clicked. The crowd erupted in supportive cheers. Celia, in that heartbreaking moment, couldn't shake the memory of Madeline's gaze on Jonathan just minutes before. As dessert was being served, a decadent chocolate mousse, topped with gold leaf, Celia slipped away from the table under the pretense of needing a moment to rest. The baby was pressing on her bladder, but she also needed a quiet space to collect her thoughts. Once out of the ballroom, she made her way down a side corridor lined with ornate mirrors and plush carpeting. She paused by a small alcove, bracing herself on the marble ledge, trying to calm her racing heart. Suddenly, hushed voices drifted from around the corner. Curiosity piqued. Celia tiptoed closer, her breath catching in her throat when she recognized Jonathan's baritone. He was speaking in a low voice, and she recognized Madeline's subtle laugh in response. Gathering her courage, Celia took slow, silent steps toward the sound. She peered around the corner and saw them, Jonathan leaning in, Madeline's hand on his lapel, an intimacy in their posture that left no doubt. Then Madeline whispered something Celia couldn't catch. Jonathan responded with a nod, his eyes filled with an unguarded tenderness. That was all Celia needed to see. She felt a jolt of nausea, whether from pregnancy or heartbreak. She couldn't be sure. She gripped the wall for support, her mind reeling. The rumors were no longer rumors. The phone calls were no mere business talks. Jonathan was having an affair, and he wasn't even bothering to hide it carefully. Celia retreated hastily, determined that she wouldn't confront him behind closed doors. If Jonathan Saxon had reduced her to a prop in their marriage, she decided in her shock and fury that the exposure must match the deception. She thought of all the times he had assured her that everything was fine, and how she had tried to believe him for the sake of their unborn child. Now, it felt as though she had swallowed molten lead, the betrayal burning through her every nerve. She yearned to call out his name, to confront him right there in the corridor. But a calmer voice inside her demanded a more deliberate approach. As Celia stepped back into the ballroom, the light and music assaulted her senses in a bizarre, disorienting way. The laughter, the tinkling of champagne glasses, the swirl of formal gowns, it all felt staged. She saw Jonathan re-emerge with Madeline a few steps behind him. He paused near the doors, said something to her, and then rejoined the gala. Madeline slipped away to another group of guests. Looking at him from across the room, Celia saw a man who could lie to her face for months, then seamlessly slip into the role of doting husband and charitable billionaire. Her blood roared in her ears. She felt a surge of adrenaline, and a voice in her head told her that if she didn't act now, she would drown in sorrow and regret. This was the moment that would define the rest of her life. With her heart pounding, she pushed through the crowd, ignoring the concerned greetings and forced pleasantries. If Jonathan wanted to lie to the world, Celia was about to shatter that illusion in the most dramatic way possible. When she reached Jonathan, he was in mid-conversation with Dr. Naomi Wu, who was recounting details of a new pediatric wing opening. Sensing Celia's approach, Dr. Wu politely excused herself, leaving the couple alone. Jonathan turned to Celia, and for a fleeting moment, genuine concern crossed his face. "You look pale," he said, scanning her expression. "Is everything okay? Maybe you should sit down." Celia stared at him for a long second. Then, with her voice trembling, she asked, "Why don't you tell me what you were doing with Madeline just now?" Alone in the corridor. Instantly, Jonathan's eyes narrowed. He tried to mask his reaction with a dismissive shrug. "Just discussing business. She was giving me some updates about—" "Don't lie to me," Celia hissed, her voice suddenly carrying over the hush in the room. Several heads nearby turned in their direction, sensing the drama unfolding. Celia didn't care who overheard. In fact, part of her wanted them all to hear. "I've been watching you two all night. I've heard the rumors. I've seen the phone calls. She's not just your communications assistant." Jonathan stiffened, glancing around at the onlookers. "Celia, this isn't the place," he muttered, trying to steer her away from prying eyes. But Celia stood her ground, her heart hammered in her chest, and tears stung her eyes, but she didn't blink. "Don't you dare try to sweep me aside, Jonathan. Not after I've spent months wondering why you're never home. Not after you've humiliated me like this." By now, a tangible hush had fallen over the nearby tables. The sound of cutlery ceased as guests turned in unison, eyes wide. Among them were reporters and photographers, always invited to lavish events for positive press coverage, their cameras aimed with renewed interest. At that moment, the band stopped playing, startled by the sudden tension. A high-level donor from the next table coughed uncomfortably, and Dr. Naomi Wu tried to inch closer to see if she could intervene. Jonathan reached out to grip Celia's arm, his face contorted with anger, shame, and fear. "Celia, let's talk about this privately," he hissed, but she pulled away from his grasp. With a shaky voice, she turned to the onlookers and said, "My husband is having an affair with a woman he hired, and he's been lying to me for months." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Flashes of light went off as some paparazzi took pictures. Jonathan, clearly panicked, tried to shield his face. "Celia, you're overreacting," he half-whispered, half-pleaded. "We can discuss this at home." Suddenly, Madeline Fox herself appeared at the edge of the group, drawn by the commotion. She froze when she realized that she was the center of Celia's accusations. A hush fell between the three of them, drawing an almost cinematic tension. Madeline's eyes darted from Celia to Jonathan, and she visibly paled. She stammered, "Jonathan, maybe I should leave." Celia locked her gaze on Madeline, heartbreak fueling her rage. "You should have left a long time ago," she spat, tears starting to flow. "How dare you step between a man and his pregnant wife? Were you both so blinded by your own desires that you couldn't see how disgusting this is?" Madeline stumbled over an apology. "I never intended," she started, her voice trembling. Jonathan stood silent, hands clenched at his sides, torn between fury at being exposed and panic over the ramifications for his image and business. Celia's emotions, pent up for months, cascaded forth. Her voice rose in anguished betrayal, echoing through the large ballroom. "Is it my fault for believing in us, Jonathan? Did I do something wrong, or was I just too naive to see who you really are?" She felt her chest tighten, her eyes brimming with tears. "I gave up my time, my energy, my loyalty for you, only to find out you've been sneaking around with your assistant?" The stares intensified. Jonathan's hand shook as he tried once more to usher Celia away from the crowd, but she stepped back, refusing to be silenced. Several guests rose from their chairs, unsure whether to intervene or let the scene play out. The tension in the room was thick enough to slice with a knife. Murmurs broke out among the stunned attendees. Alyssa Carter, Celia's old friend, stood not far away, her eyes wide, her hand over her mouth. The rest of the philanthropic community, bankers and high society figures in attendance, whispered in shock or disbelief. Some looked on with morbid fascination after all. Public scandals involving the wealthy were fodder for gossip columns. Others seemed genuinely upset, especially those who knew Celia personally and respected her charitable contributions. In the swirl of confusion, no one knew quite how to break the spell. Only the flash of cameras and the hum of whispered speculation filled the silence left after Celia's last outburst. Jonathan looked over at Madeline, their eyes meeting in a charged moment. It only confirmed the worst for the onlookers. He didn't deny Celia's accusation, and that, perhaps, was the final nail in the coffin of his perfect image. Then, without warning, Celia felt a pang in her abdomen. The stress, the shouting, the swirl of emotions, it had all taken a toll. She gasped and doubled over, pressing a trembling hand to her belly. Immediately, Jonathan's anger seemed to evaporate, replaced by alarm. "Celia?" He reached for her shoulder, genuine concern in his eyes. "Are you okay?" A wave of dizziness threatened to consume her. She was 5 months pregnant after all, and the emotional hurricane was more than enough to push her body to the brink. "I need air," she whispered. Her face was ashen, beads of sweat trickling down her forehead. Concerned murmurs rippled around them. Dr. Naomi Wu rushed forward, guiding Celia to a nearby chair. Jonathan knelt beside her, terror in his gaze, while Madeline lingered in the distance, uncertain and feeling very much like the intruder she was. Dr. Wu checked Celia's pulse, encouraging her to take slow, deep breaths. She waved off the suggestion of an ambulance for the moment, reasoning that Celia might just be overwhelmed. But every eye in the ballroom was now fixed on the drama unfolding. Jonathan hovered anxiously, wanting to help but mindful of the stairs, uncertain if his presence brought Celia comfort or distress. With shaky composure, Celia looked at him. For a fleeting moment, she saw the man she married, the man who once held her hand at a child's hospital bedside and whispered that he wanted a big, loving family. "Jonathan," she murmured, her tears more from heartbreak than physical pain. "How could you?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The weight of his actions hung heavy, and the sight of his pregnant wife in distress tore through his chest. Everything he'd spent years building, his marriage, his reputation, his philanthropic image, now threatened to collapse in a single public spectacle. Under Dr. Wu's guidance, Celia managed to stand on unsteady feet. She was done with the illusions, the appearances. The paparazzi, still capturing every moment, parted like a sea as Celia walked through them, Jonathan trailing behind, pale and anxious. Behind them, the gala descended into an uneasy chatter. Guests were unsure whether to linger or leave, the atmosphere ruined by the scandal. Outside the hotel, Celia refused Jonathan's offer of assistance into their limousine. "I can get in by myself," she said through clenched teeth. When he tried to climb in beside her, she placed a trembling hand against his chest. "Don't!" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I can't even look at you right now." Jonathan paused, choking on a response that never formed. The driver stood by, uncertain. Eventually, Jonathan stepped away, allowing Celia to close the car door. She sank into the leather seat, tears falling freely now that she was away from prying eyes. The only question echoing in her mind was, how had it all come to this? When Celia returned to their penthouse, she found it suffocating. Every room held memories of Jonathan, from the framed wedding photos to the souvenirs collected on their travels. She plucked off her earrings and placed them on a side table where the ring Jonathan gave her for their first anniversary also sat. An emptiness weighed on her that no amount of wealth or luxury could alleviate. She dialed her older sister, Marianne, who lived in Boston. Within an hour, Marianne arrived. Celia crumpled into her arms, sobbing until she could barely speak. Marianne helped her out of the gala gown, laid her down, and offered solace. "You're not alone," Marianne said firmly. We'll figure out what to do next. Meanwhile, Jonathan stayed behind at the Waldorf Regency, fielding frantic calls from PR representatives, board members, and, most painfully, his parents. George Saxon, the family patriarch, had built Saxon Holdings into a giant. This scandal threatened the family's pristine image. How could you be so reckless? George bellowed on the phone, more concerned with damage control than his son's emotional state. In the background, Jonathan could hear his mother Marcia weeping, humiliated by the headlines she anticipated in the morning. By dawn, every major paper and gossip website carried the news. Saxon scandal, billionaire heir's affair sparks public showdown. Photographs captured Celia in tears, Jonathan looking stricken, Madeline Fox standing awkwardly nearby. Social media exploded with opinions. Some sympathized with Celia, lauding her courage. Others criticized the public spectacle, suggesting she should have handled it privately. Nevertheless, the narrative was set. Jonathan Saxon was a billionaire philanderer, and his pregnant wife was the betrayed victim. Calls flooded Celia's phone friends, acquaintances, even talk shows wanting exclusive interviews. She turned them all down, except for close family and a few personal confidants. She had no energy to speak publicly yet. Marianne dealt with the constant knocks at the penthouse door from reporters. She told them politely but firmly that Celia wouldn't be making any statements. Jonathan eventually returned to the penthouse, only to find Marianne waiting for him in the foyer, arms crossed. "She doesn't want to see you," she said icily. Jonathan's eyes were bloodshot, his shoulders sagging. "I just need to talk to her, explain," he tried. But Marianne shook her head. "Explain what? That you lied? That you've been cheating on her for months? She's pregnant, Jonathan. She doesn't need more stress." With that, Marianne closed the door in his face. If Jonathan hoped to contain the scandal, he was in for another shock. Madeline Fox gave a short interview to a gossip column the following afternoon, claiming she was also blindsided by the extent of Jonathan's dishonesty. "He told me he was unhappy, that the marriage was practically over," Madeline stated. "If I had known Celia was pregnant and so deeply invested in their relationship, I never would have gotten involved." Her statement ignited a new wave of fury in Celia. She read it on her tablet, the words blurring through hot tears. Jonathan had deceived them both. Or was Madeline merely trying to absolve herself of guilt? Regardless, Celia felt the ground beneath her feet shifting. The life she'd believed in was unraveling, thread by thread. Desperate to salvage what was left, Jonathan tried to write Celia a letter, an old-fashioned approach. He slid the envelope beneath the penthouse door after Marianne refused him entrance. Celia found it late in the evening. It was a lengthy apology, filled with regrets, explanations about how he felt overwhelmed, how Madeline offered him emotional support he felt lacking at home due to the demands of his job. He wrote about wanting to be a better husband and father, insisting he never intended for the affair to go so far. Celia read the letter twice. Each time, the words stung. His attempts to rationalize the betrayal felt weak and self-serving. Did he expect her to be sympathetic because he was stressed out by business deals? She tore up the letter, letting the pieces fall into the wastebasket, her tears soaking the fragments. Marianne, ever practical, suggested Celia consult a lawyer, if only to prepare for potential divorce proceedings or settlement discussions. Reluctantly, Celia agreed. She reached out to a well-known family attorney, Helen Greenwood, who handled high-profile cases with discretion. Helen arrived at the penthouse with an empathetic smile, aware of the emotional toll. "You don't have to decide anything immediately," she assured Celia, "but it's wise to understand your rights and safeguard your child's future." The conversation was draining but necessary. Celia learned about prenuptial agreements, custody laws, and the complexities of divorcing a billionaire. Saxon Holdings might shield Jonathan from certain financial obligations, but the media spectacle would push him to settle. Celia's head pounded at the realization that her heartbreak was about to become a legal chess match, with lawyers on both sides and reputations at stake. Meanwhile, Jonathan sat in his parents' mansion, enduring a barrage of criticisms. George and Marcia were furious that Jonathan's indiscretion threatened the entire brand. They demanded that he make a public statement showing contrition and announcing that he and Celia were working things out. "Do you have any idea how many investors have called me this morning?" George raged. "They're worried your personal drama will spill over and damage our negotiations." Jonathan, exhausted and regretful, tried to stand up for himself. "My marriage is at stake, Dad. I can't just parade Celia out for a photo op. She wants nothing to do with me right now." Marcia dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, lamenting their tarnished family name. "Fix it," she whispered, "or you're risking more than just your marriage." In the penthouse, Celia vacillated between despair and flashes of nostalgia. She remembered the day Jonathan proposed a candlelit picnic under the stars at the Saxon family estate. How he'd presented her with a sapphire ring because he knew she adored ocean hues. The man who knelt before her then seemed worlds apart from the one who had deceived her so thoroughly. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked Marianne one evening, her voice trembling. "Do I walk away, raise this child alone, and forever deal with the press, labeling me the scorned ex-wife?" Marianne squeezed her hand. "Or do I try to forgive him and risk never trusting him again?" Marianne had no easy answers, offering only love and support. After days of cold silence, Celia finally agreed to meet Jonathan in a neutral setting, a private suite at the Saxon Tower. She arrived with Marianne by her side, though Marianne stayed in the lounge outside. Jonathan looked haggard, circles under his eyes, hair disheveled. He immediately offered her a seat and a glass of water. "I know you have no reason to believe me," he began softly, "but I am truly sorry. I let stress and my own insecurity drive me into a situation that spiraled out of control. I never stopped loving you, Celia." She stared at him, tears brimming again. "Then why wasn't I enough?" she asked, her voice cracking. Jonathan shook his head, swallowing hard. "It's not about you not being enough. I was weak. I felt pressure to live up to everyone's expectations, my father's, the board's, the media's. It's no excuse, but I convinced myself I had no safe space to be vulnerable, and Madeline was there, offering comfort in a misguided way." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "You had a safe space. It was right here with me. You're the one who shut me out." They talked for hours, the conversation raw and painful. Celia shed tears, venting her anger. Jonathan accepted her accusations without deflecting. He confessed how he felt overshadowed by George Saxon's legacy, how the pressure to expand the empire left him feeling isolated. Yet none of it diminished the gravity of his betrayal. Celia finally admitted her fears of raising the child alone. She admitted how, despite everything, part of her still loved him, still wanted the dream they once had. Jonathan cried too, promising to cut ties with Madeline, offering to go to counseling, therapy, anything Celia wanted. But Celia left uncertain if she could ever truly forgive him. While Jonathan and Celia navigated these tumultuous waters, the media refused to let go. More outlets piled onto the story, rehashing every detail. Opinion pieces emerged on whether Celia was a hero for publicly calling out infidelity, or whether she had humiliated her husband unnecessarily. Late-night talk shows made jokes about billionaire dramas. The story took on a life of its own. Saxon Holdings stock wavered, fueling speculation. Some believed the scandal indicated internal chaos. In the midst of it, Jonathan's father threatened to remove him as CEO if he didn't stabilize the situation quickly. Investors, it seemed, had little patience for personal crises. Under counsel from the Saxon family's PR team, Jonathan prepared a public apology, acknowledging his infidelity and promising to mend his marriage and responsibilities. "It's contrived," Celia muttered when she read the draft, "but if you think this will help quell the media, go ahead. Just know it changes nothing between us." Jonathan winced, recognizing the cost of his actions. He delivered the apology in a carefully orchestrated press conference, reading from a statement that expressed remorse and a commitment to healing. Predictably, tabloids claimed it was too little, too late, or purely a business move. Still, it somewhat appeased Saxon Holdings stakeholders, who hoped the spectacle would blow over eventually. At Marianne's suggestion, Celia agreed to attend a few couples counseling sessions with Jonathan, led by a renowned therapist experienced in high-profile marriages. In these sessions, Celia struggled to voice her deepest resentments, her insecurities about the child, and her sense that Jonathan had shattered every bit of trust she had placed in him. Jonathan, for his part, listened attentively, expressing regret and acknowledging how foolish he had been. There were moments of raw connection when Celia saw guilt and heartbreak etched onto his face, and she knew her own pain was mirrored there. For a heartbeat, hope flared that maybe, just maybe, they could salvage the marriage. But the memory of Jonathan's betrayal and Madeline's presence loomed over them. Celia feared that no amount of therapy would erase the betrayal from her mind. In a dramatic gesture, Jonathan formally ended Madeline's contract with Saxon Holdings, citing a conflict of interest. Internally, it was clear he was cutting all ties with her. While this didn't fix the root problem, it did show Celia he was at least taking steps to remove temptation. Madeline herself packed up her office late one evening, escorted by corporate security to avoid a scene. She left behind a final note for Jonathan, which he never showed to Celia, disposing of it without reading. He said he wanted no final words from her. He needed to move on. A month of tension and attempts at reconciliation passed. Then came a crisis that eclipsed all else. During a routine prenatal checkup, doctors detected an irregularity in the baby's heartbeat. Panicked, Celia underwent a barrage of tests. Jonathan, who had come to the appointment at Celia's hesitant invitation, paled at the news. The next several days were a roller coaster of hospital visits, second opinions, and anxious waiting. This potential complication forced them to confront the fact that the baby was, above all, their shared priority. Even Marianne softened toward Jonathan, seeing him pace the halls of the hospital, frantic for news. When the specialists concluded it was a manageable condition that would require close monitoring, Celia broke down in relieved sobs. Jonathan held her for the first time in weeks, real tenderness passing between them. In the wake of the baby's health scare, Celia and Jonathan discovered a fragile bridge back to each other. The immediacy of ensuring their child's well-being overshadowed their personal bitterness. They spent more time together in doctors' offices, discussing the baby's future, exchanging anxious glances that spoke volumes. Jonathan moved back into a separate guest room at the penthouse, at Celia's cautious invitation, acknowledging that they needed proximity for the baby's sake. Such closeness reignited old memories of the couple they once were. Late one night, Jonathan knocked on Celia's door, softly asking if she needed anything. She looked at him, pajamas rumpled, and saw the man she had loved for so long. In a whisper she said, "I just need you to be honest and stay with me." He nodded, tears brimming. For the first time since the scandal, Celia allowed him to hold her as she fell asleep, though a gaping wound still lingered in her heart. With the baby's health concerns stabilizing, Celia cautiously accompanied Jonathan to a new charity event, this time a more intimate affair, raising funds for pediatric cardiology research. Invitations had been sent out well before their scandal, and Celia recognized the significance of showing a united front. She had no desire to be paraded around, but she also wanted to stand in solidarity for the cause that now affected her life so personally. Eyes followed them throughout the evening, but this time the questions were gentler, the stares somewhat sympathetic. Jonathan stayed close to Celia, protective and attentive. For many observers, it was a sign that maybe the Saxons were finding a way to repair the damage. But Celia knew their journey was far from over. Still, small steps felt like monumental progress after such a devastating betrayal. One afternoon, Celia received a surprising phone call from none other than Marcia Saxon, Jonathan's mother. Marcia, known for her formal demeanor, apologized for the entire ordeal and asked to meet Celia privately for lunch. Hesitant, Celia agreed, hoping it wouldn't be another lecture on maintaining the family brand. Over tea and delicate pastries, Marcia spoke with unexpected warmth. "I was a young wife once, Celia," she began. "George was deeply involved in the business, just as Jonathan is now. There were moments I felt completely alone, overshadowed by the empire and by the demands of the family name. I don't know if it can help you, but I understand your loneliness, and I'm genuinely sorry you had to endure this scandal so publicly." Celia listened, tears threatening to fall. This was the first time she saw Marcia not as an aloof matriarch, but as a woman who once faced similar struggles. The older woman reached for Celia's hand. "Jonathan is my son, and I love him. But I'm not excusing what he did. All I can say is that I hope you'll find a way forward that brings you some peace. Whether that includes Jonathan or not, I will respect your decision." Over the subsequent weeks, Celia and Jonathan committed to an intensive trust rebuilding process. They continued therapy, delving deeper into the root causes of his infidelity. They worked on open communication exercises, daily check-ins, and scheduling date nights devoid of business talk. Jonathan shut off his phone in the evenings, a small but significant gesture that Celia appreciated. She, in turn, voiced her concerns openly rather than bottling them up. Some days were riddled with flashbacks. If Jonathan's phone buzzed unexpectedly, Celia's heart would race, memories of Madeline flooding back. He would show her the screen immediately, a silent reassurance he had nothing to hide. It felt unnatural at times, but they both understood transparency was the price for a second chance. Despite the slow progress, the Saxon family remained split. George was still furious that the scandal lingered in the media. Stock analysts occasionally mentioned the fiasco when discussing Saxon holdings, an irritant to the old man's pride. Yet Marcia grew closer to Celia, offering baby clothes and a family heirloom cradle. Jonathan's siblings, who lived abroad, called Celia offering moral support. In private, Jonathan faced barbed remarks from his father, who threatened to impose contingencies on his inheritance if he didn't lock down his personal life. "I don't care if you love her or not," George once muttered. "Just fix this mess." Jonathan loathed the notion of a loveless facade, determined to prove he was genuinely repairing his marriage. By Celia's 7th month, tensions had cooled. The paparazzi interest waned, moving on to fresh scandals. Jonathan poured himself into doting on Celia, accompanying her to every doctor's appointment, designing a nursery that resembled a cozy dreamscape rather than a sterile mansion suite. He even attended prenatal classes, learning how to swaddle a baby, how to support Celia during labor. Each class reminded them of why they embarked on this journey together in the first place: love, partnership, the desire to create a family. As the baby kicked energetically, Jonathan would place his palm on Celia's stomach and grin, tears sometimes forming in his eyes. For Celia, moments like these felt like slivers of light piercing through storm clouds, a reminder that maybe forgiveness was possible, even if forgetting was not. Just when Celia thought they were in calmer waters, An unexpected visitor shook things up, Madeline Fox. She appeared at the Saxon Tower one evening after business hours. Jonathan, working late, was startled to find her waiting in the lobby. "I need to talk to you," she said firmly. Jonathan stiffened, but decided to hear her out, away from prying ears. In a private corner of the expansive lobby, Madeline confided that she had accepted a position in London. She was leaving New York, possibly for good. "I came to say goodbye," she said softly, "and to return these." She handed him a small box containing a few gifts. He had given her pieces of jewelry and personal tokens. "I don't want them. This affair, it was a mistake. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for everything." Jonathan nodded, words failing him. He didn't want to delve into the past again. "Thank you," he managed finally, "for doing this. I wish you well." Madeline nodded, tears glistening in her eyes before she hurried out. It felt like a final page, turning in a painful chapter. Jonathan said nothing to Celia that night, unsure whether it would help or harm their fragile progress. The following day, guilt gnawed at Jonathan. He decided to tell Celia about Madeline's visit, not wanting any more secrets between them. He found her in the nursery, organizing tiny clothes by size. Her eyes flicked with alarm when he mentioned Madeline's name, but she listened silently. "She came to say goodbye," Jonathan explained. "She returned some things I'd given her. I promise you I didn't ask to see her. She just showed up." He watched Celia's expression as she folded a small onesie. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice subdued. "I appreciate your honesty." He breathed a sigh of relief, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I don't want any more lies between us," he said. Celia gave a small, tentative smile, the first in a while that felt real. One night in Celia's 8th month, she woke to sharp pains and an alarming trickle of fluid. Fearing premature labor, Jonathan rushed her to the hospital. The next few hours were a blur of doctors, monitors, and Celia gripping Jonathan's hand as contractions threatened to intensify. He stayed by her side, whispering encouragement, eyes filled with concern. Thankfully, the medical team managed to halt the premature labor, administering medications to strengthen the baby's lungs in case of an early delivery. Celia was ordered on strict bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. The scare brought Jonathan and Celia even closer, reminding them both that life was fragile, and the time for petty resentments and half-truths was over. Bound to her bed, Celia found unexpected intimacy with Jonathan. He set up a comfortable recliner in the bedroom, working remotely while she rested. They chatted about names for the baby, flipping through name books, scribbling ideas on notepads. They reminisced about the early days of their courtship. Celia felt a small flicker of the love that once dominated her heart, slowly rekindling as trust began to mend. In quiet moments, Jonathan apologized again, not with grand speeches, but simple acts of service, making her meals, reading to her, massaging her feet. Celia, who had once thrown away his letter, now read each text he sent her with an open mind, finding sincerity in his words. She realized that while the betrayal would forever scar their history, perhaps the future could be written anew. At exactly 39 weeks, Celia went into labor naturally. Jonathan rushed her to the hospital, brimming with equal measures of excitement and terror. This time, there were no complications. After hours of pain, tears, and unwavering support from Jonathan, Celia delivered a healthy baby girl. They named her Aurora, a name meaning dawn, symbolizing a new beginning. When the shrill cry of the newborn filled the delivery room, Jonathan's eyes flooded with tears. He gently cradled his daughter, pressing a kiss to her tiny forehead. Celia watched in awe, her chest exploding with a love so profound it overshadowed the lingering grief of the past months. In the hospital room, as Celia held Aurora to her chest, Jonathan knelt by the bedside, unable to tear his gaze from the infant. "Thank you," he whispered to Celia, his voice thick with emotion. She gave him a tired smile, exhaustion etched across her features. For a brief moment, they were simply new parents, bound by this miraculous life they had brought into the world. Marcia and George Saxon soon arrived, cautious smiles on their faces. Marcia cradled her granddaughter, tears of joy marking her cheeks. Even George's stern demeanor softened at the sight of the tiny baby. "You've done well," he muttered, clearing his throat awkwardly. For that day, at least, the bitterness dissolved in the presence of an innocent child. Over the following weeks, Celia and Jonathan navigated the sleepless nights and whirlwind days of new parenthood. Each 3 a.m. feeding was an exercise in teamwork. Jonathan took paternity leave, stepping away from Saxon. Holdings to focus on his family, an unprecedented move that surprised even his father. Gradually, Celia discovered that the newborn's presence brought a sense of calm she hadn't felt since before the affair. Jonathan, red-eyed from lack of sleep, still made her tea in the mornings, kissed Aurora's forehead, and read baby books as though studying for an exam. Celia saw genuine transformation in him, a humility and dedication that felt real. That didn't erase the betrayal, nor did it automatically mend her shattered trust. But forgiveness, she realized, wasn't a single act. It was a process, nourished by consistent effort and genuine remorse. She watched Jonathan's daily actions, each small gesture a brick in the rebuilding of her trust. As time went on, the media's fascination waned, replaced by newer scandals involving other high-profile figures. For Celia, it was a welcome relief. She had no desire to relive the fiasco. Occasional articles still speculated on the state of the Saxon marriage, but with the baby's birth and Jonathan's public shift toward family life, the story lost its bite. The philanthropic community, too, began to refocus on the core issues: hospital expansions, medical research, and charitable grants, rather than the Saxon scandal. Celia resumed her involvement in these causes, with Aurora occasionally in tow. Jonathan accompanied them when he could, pushing the stroller through hospital corridors and greeting children with gentle smiles. Their presence as a family, bruised but intact, spoke more than any press release could. On the first anniversary of the scandalous gala, Jonathan surprised Celia with a small, private ceremony in the garden of their penthouse. Only Marianne, Dr. Naomi Wu, and a few close friends attended. Standing amid roses and fairy lights, Jonathan renewed his vows to Celia, tears shining in his eyes as he promised to be the husband and father they deserved. Celia, holding Aurora in her arms, listened with trembling lips. She offered her own short vow, acknowledging the pain but also their journey toward healing. "We stand here today not as a perfect couple, but as 2 flawed individuals choosing to move forward in love," she said, her gaze steady on Jonathan. It wasn't the fairy tale renewal some might expect. It was tinged with the knowledge of their trials. Yet the sincerity in both their voices resonated. When the minister declared them recommitted, a gentle breeze swept through the garden, rustling the roses and carrying away, if only for that moment, the shadows of the past. The months turned into a year, then another. Aurora blossomed into a lively toddler, her laughter filling every corner of the penthouse. Celia and Jonathan continued therapy, maintaining open lines of communication. Was everything perfect? No. Celia still had moments of doubt, especially whenever Jonathan came home late. He, in turn, sometimes struggled with guilt, yet they both chose day by day to remain committed to their family. Saxon Holdings rebounded from the scandal, with Jonathan implementing more robust ethical guidelines for workplace relationships, a move spurred by his own regrets. George stepped back, allowing Jonathan to shape a new era for the company. Marcia, doting on her granddaughter, found renewed closeness with Celia, frequently hosting family dinners free from past tension. One crisp autumn day, Celia strolled with Aurora in Central Park, Jonathan at her side. Fallen leaves crunched underfoot, painting the path in russet and gold. Aurora, wide-eyed with wonder, pointed at passing ducks and squirrels. Jonathan gently lifted her to his shoulders, and she squealed in delight. Celia walked beside them, arms folded protectively over herself, a small smile on her lips. A passerby recognized them, discreetly snapping a photo. Later that evening, Celia saw a small blurb about their family outing on a social media page. The tone, for once, was positive. Saxon family enjoys quiet day in the park. No sensational headlines, no references to affairs, just a family, living their life, healing from the scars of betrayal. Celia exhaled, realizing that for the first time in a long while, she felt genuine hope. Their story wasn't neatly wrapped up with a bow. The scars remained, but so did love and a determination to choose each other every single day. This is a story about heartbreak, public scandal, and the extraordinary challenges that can arise behind a billionaire's gilded doors. But it's also a story of second chances, personal growth, and the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding trust. Celia and Jonathan's marriage was tested by betrayal and humiliation under the harsh glare of media lights. Despite the pain, Celia found inner strength to stand her ground, protect her unborn child, and voice her truth. Jonathan recognized his own failings and fought to regain the trust he had shattered. Their journey proves that while forgiveness doesn't erase wounds, it can foster a renewed sense of purpose and hope. In the end, they chose love, acceptance, and the willingness to rebuild their future, one day at a time. If you found their story compelling, please remember to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that inspire and resonate.